So we'll start with, what is the EV line? Well, it's a graph of the expected value of your poker winnings adjusted based on all-ins before the river. So this is like a little bit of a wordy sentence, but it's meant to just be the full, all-encompassing definition. And that is it. And I think most people realize that. I don't think this part of the presentation is anything confusing. It's only factors in all-ins. It does not factor in non-all-in pots. Does not factor in pots that were all-in on the river because there's no cards yet to come at that stage of the hand. So going all-in on the river and getting called or not called is not really different. It just doesn't affect the line. Let's put it that way. Because, yeah. Applies to cash games and most single table sit and goes. It would actually apply to more games. It would apply to tournaments, like bigger tournaments as well, if ICM was more calculable in those bigger tournaments. But because it's not, we're going to stick to this definition that it really just applies to cash games and single table sit and goes. It's probably the most accurate in a cash game setting and a heads up setting, because you're not distorting, you're not having to place ICM value to your stack at different stages of tournaments, which ICM value, as we might have talked about before, depending on which videos you've watched of mine and others, you might know that it basically makes huge assumptions about your skill level being equal to others and things like that. So ICM approximations of stack values are quite, relatively imperfect. So that's why I'm saying that heads up and cash games are going to be the most close to perfect when viewing the red line in terms of the value that it brings and what it's trying to do, what it tells you. It's not implemented for MTTs of any kind for a few reasons. We kind of just mentioned that. Basically, you can't calculate the ICM almost at all at many stages of the tournament, and I think just because the payouts are so complicated in bigger MTTs, factoring those in correctly would also take some really advanced software that we don't really have, and it wouldn't really necessarily add that much value. So keep that in mind as we go forward. So what is EV diff? This is the term that you'll see, I believe, specifically in Hold'em Manager. It's one of the menus that you can filter by, and every hand will include an EV diff column. And I'm not sure if the term is in Poker Tracker. I'm sure there's an equivalent, if not the same exact name. So basically, EV diff is the difference in the EV that you had, the equity when all the chips went in, versus the result. So if you win the all-in, you're going to win, 100% of the pot. If you lose the all-in, you're going to lose 100% of the pot. And the EV is always going to be in between, unless you have your opponent drawing dead or you were drawing dead in order to have 100% equity or 0% equity. Unless that's the case, your EV line is going to be somewhere in the middle. So something people often misunderstand about that is that if you win an all-in, you're automatically running above EV. I mean, people say, well, how come I got it in good, let's say 70% equity, I won the hand, but my red line is down. Well, your red line actually didn't go down. Your EV diff might be negative something because you won 100% of the pot, but you're only supposed to win, let's say, 70% of the pot. Okay, so now you won more than you're actually supposed to. So your EV diff might actually be negative. Your red line, though, in that situation would still point up, but just at a lower angle. It would be less up than the green line. So the green line both lines will be up. You would have gotten it in good, and you would have actually run a little bit better than average, because you can't win 100% of the time getting it in 70% equity. So that's one of the most critical misunderstandings of EV diff is, why is it negative? Well, it's relative to the result. If you lose an all-in, your EV diff will always be positive, unless it's zero if you were drawing dead, which is obviously relatively rare. So keep that in mind. It's relative to the result, this term EV diff, but it's still very useful measurement, and it's very accurate, except for the few times that there's been a glitch in the calculation and they've had to quickly, write an update to the software to fix it. That has happened, and I've seen it happen more in PLO. I don't know if they ever. I kind of stopped following to see if they were fixing that a couple of years ago. But so there can be mistakes in the calculations occasionally, but 99% of the time that I've seen people post those kind of things, it's more they just didn't understand what they were saying.